Joining us now is Dr. Varun Vohra. He is the academic director and clinical toxicologist with the Michigan Poison Center, and he joins us now on the MegaCast. Dr. Vohra, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate having you on. So as we head into the Halloween weekend, kids will be out trick-or-treating either on Halloween Day with their friends and family. They may be going to some parties as well, but they're also going to be interacting with a lot of people that they may not know, and in many cases that they don't know. They're just strangers and they're getting candy from them. But like always, there are certain hazards that come along with that beyond just the stranger danger element of it. From the Michigan Poison Center's side, what are some things as we go into Halloween season that parents and even kids that are old enough to keep an eye out for something like that, like these hazards, what should they be looking out for this Halloween season?
Yeah, so I think the parents are going to be playing a huge role with all of this, especially with young kids receiving candy, like you said, from people that they don't know. So I think with parents having to check each and every piece of candy that kids do get when they get back home, reading the labels properly is going to be important. Not allowing or not allowing the children to eat or get into any sort of damaged or wet or tampered with sort of packaging. I think anything homemade or unpackaged fruit, we'd recommend avoiding. And I think for the kids or kids who are old enough to kind of know better is to not accept anything, with young kids at least, not to accept anything from strangers in terms of the candies or items that they may be getting. And always have an adult check them before consuming them. So I think the parents or the adults are going to be pivotal during this time of year.
So what are you checking these candies for when if you're a parent and you're looking through your kid's candy, either in process, if they'd like to eat some of it along the way when they're trick-or-treating, or more ideally, as you said, after they've gotten home? What are some of these things that you're looking for, and maybe some new things this year that we're looking for as opposed to previously?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, making sure that the packaging is intact, it's not been tampered with, it looks like regular candy that we're all used to. And then as far as new things, I mean, what we're seeing throughout the years now is a kind of an increase in these sort of pediatric exposures to these marijuana edibles. So a lot of times THC will be infused into commonly consumed snack items like brownies, cookies, candies, what have you, and they resemble them too. So recently there was a gas station where law enforcement did find marijuana edibles in products that look like, Gushers or Warheads. So I think that's where reading the label is going to be really important for parents, because oftentimes labels can have things that say THC infused or marijuana infused, and making sure that those all look at least legitimate. It is tough because there's no real federal regulations right now in terms of packaging for these products, but it's going to be really important for the parents to kind of examine each and every piece of candy and making sure that they look and they appear like traditionally held candies that we're used to from the convenience store.
And what sort of negative impacts can be had on a child in particular? And it obviously would depend on age and body type as well, because younger children are smaller and older children are usually bigger, and so the contents of these edibles are going to have different effects on them. But generally speaking, how would one of these marijuana edibles that may look like a regular candy bar for a child, how would that affect them if they are exposed to these edibles?
Yeah, so typically what we'll see, and like you hit the nail on the head, right? So smaller kids, they may be more susceptible with a lower toxic threshold, because just based on sheer size, it doesn't take as much for them to show symptoms. So symptoms will typically be, they'll present as drowsy. They won't be acting like themselves. They may have uncoordinated movements. And, eventually they'll get more sedated, depending on the severity of the exposure. With really, really massive exposures, you'll see that sort of neurological impairment with the drowsiness, reduced level of consciousness. They may have an increase in heart rate at first, but eventually over the course of time, we would be worried about their heart rate and blood pressure kind of lowering down. and then also trouble breathing potentially as well with really big exposures. So the most important thing to do is to keep an eye on your child first and foremost, making sure that they're behaving like normal, and they're eating and drinking okay. If there's any suspicion or of exposure, but this child is not showing symptoms yet, I'd recommend calling the Michigan Poison and Drug Information Center. Our number is 1-800-222-1222. We have specialists on hand to answer those types of questions and help guide parents through that. The important thing, though, is not to make kids vomit. We do not recommend making anyone vomit forcefully, because that can create even more negative issues and potential complications. And in the event that you think that it is an emergency, always call 911 and get the child to a hospital as soon as possible.
We're joined by Dr. Varun Vohra. He is the academic director and a clinical toxicologist with the Michigan Poison Center, joining us on the MegaCast. And Dr. Vohra, just how severe can these reactions be in children if they are exposed to these edibles? Can it be? Is it usually a result of hospitalization? Can it be deadly? Is it somewhere usually in between, or maybe even less severe than those symptoms?
Yeah, so I mean, typically exposures for the majority of cases will be relatively mild, and they'll resolve within typically 24 hours with really large ingestions, especially with edible products. Like I mentioned, you could see some cardiovascular issues, a drop in blood pressure and heart rate. Initially, it'll kind of present with a higher heart rate, and then eventually that can progress and decline. They could have breathing issues as well. So there have been cases where kids have ended up in the ICUs and ventilated actually because of airway issues due to massive exposures. And something kind of new on the horizon is Delta 8 THC. Which is similar to Delta 9 THC, which is the traditional active ingredient or psychoactive ingredient that we associate with marijuana and cannabis. So Delta 8 THC is also making its way out there into these kinds of products. There have been recent cases with kids getting into those adult products, thinking that it was candy. So it can be severe depending on the extent of the exposure and the dose. So it's something not to take lightly at all.
We're joined by Dr. Varun Vohra from the Michigan Poison Center today on the MegaCast. Dr. Vohra, outside of the Halloween end of things, there's been recent Salmonella outbreaks in 37 states related to onions. What should people be looking out for as they're going to the grocery store? Is this across the board with onions? Is it only specific brands? And what should people be keeping an eye out for that may link them to exposure to the salmonella?
Yeah, so there have been recent Salmonella outbreak with white, red, and yellow onions. So there seems to be, according to the CDC, that the sources via products from Mexico. And I would urge everyone to go onto the CDC website to look up, since they have a list of specific products that have either been recalled or are suspected to possibly contain or be contaminated with salmonella. The most important thing would be, if you are in doubt, if you have onions which you purchased recently and are questioning it, avoid it altogether, throw it in the trash, and go to the website and look at that list and make sure that you're buying products that are not on that list. In the same vein, there has been a recent outbreak or associated with salami sticks from Trader Joe's. It's a Soterio premium brand of Italian salami sticks, which have been affiliated or associated with salmonella contamination in several states, including Michigan. So again, doing your due diligence and making sure that you are up to date, looking at the CDC websites, and CDC is working closely with the FDA as well. Signs and symptoms associated with salmonella poisoning can be mostly GI issues, so nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Could be potentially bloody diarrhea at times, and symptoms can occur relatively quickly. I mean, anywhere within 6 hours or even longer, potentially even within 6 days. And the symptoms can last quite a long time too, upwards of 4 to 7 days. So I think the most important thing is keeping an eye, if it's a child or yourself, making sure that they are eating and drinking enough, staying hydrated. And if symptoms do last longer than, say, 3 days, go to your local urgent care or emergency department to be evaluated. I think that's going to be the most important thing, especially if you're running a high fever, if you're not able to stay hydrated, if you have a decrease in sort of your urination, if you're not urinating as frequently. That's going to be really, really important to have that examined if that persists.
We're joined by Dr. Varun Vohra. He is from the Michigan Poison Center, joining us on the MegaCast. Just a few more minutes with you, Dr. Vohra, before we'll say goodbye today. There were recent results from the annual National Youth Tobacco Survey through the FDA and the CDC. That's finding they're continuing to see an increase in the use of e-cigarettes among younger people, children at middle school and high school age in particular. Just at what rate is this growing in the U.S. and why is it of concern to the FDA and the CDC?
Yeah, so as far as e-cigarettes, we are seeing a pretty tangible increase in use, and recently certain products have been approved by certain companies, including which have gone through the FDA for approved marketing for e-cigarettes. So it is concerning just because of the actual active ingredients in these e-cigarettes are pretty highly concentrated products, especially liquid nicotine, which can be a lot more concentrated than the traditional amount that we see in tobacco cigarettes, normal cigarettes. And the concern there is, again, with exposure to the youth, especially young children getting into this, similar to the pediatric marijuana edibles. If they get into these products inadvertently, they are packaged to entice youth with packaging that is colorful, has cool names and whatnot. These products are highly, highly concentrated, and it does not take a lot for toxic effects to manifest, especially in a young child, which can include with trouble breathing in their cardiovascular system, as well as seizures, which can be really, really concerning. So it's something that we are certainly keeping an eye on and doing more outreach on with the general public as well as the schools. So our Poison Center educator has been really instrumental in kind of getting that message out there, as well as putting that information on our website and our social media platforms as well.
We're joined by Dr. Varun Vohra from the Michigan Poison Center on the MegaCast. Dr. Vohra, before we let you go, anything else that our audience should be keeping an eye out on, either as we enter the Halloween weekend or going forward?
Yeah, I think, just reiterating, when you try to, be safe when you're out there with your kids. Again, weeding every piece of candy, checking the labels, making sure that they're not tampered with. If you have any questions, call us at the Michigan Poison and Drug Information Center. We're 1-800-222-1222. Our website is mipoisonhelp.org. And we're present on all social media platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, with all this information handy for you. So if you have any questions, please call us. We're here to help with any questions and exposures. So we provide a 24/7 service, which is free of charge. So please contact us.
Well, we appreciate it. Thanks for joining us and telling us more about things we should be looking out for in the general community, and especially for those parents and kids heading into the Halloween weekend.
Yep. Thank you, Tyler. Have a good one.